Good morning. Well, in the Bible study, we're on to the second to last section in Genesis. We'll be trying to do 3 chapters today. I think we'll be fine. The first chapter is a kind of a genealogy. It's kind of a list. So it's kind of just listing off all the different descendants of Jacob once again. And then after that, we'll be talking about Jacob coming down and coming down to Egypt and then blessing some of the sons. At least Ephraim and Manasseh. So we'll do that today, and then next week we'll finish with the blessings to his direct sons. So Ephraim and Manasseh are the sons of Joseph. So there's a special meeting between Joseph and then his 2 boys, and then Jacob. So that's what we'll be talking about today. Some more Christological things going on too, especially between God and Jacob. They're pretty interesting. So I'll discuss that. And then we'll be almost done with Genesis. So we've been doing this a while, but it's been fun. And then next week we'll have, or not next week, a few weeks from now. So next week, no class. I'll be gone. I'll be going on vacation. And then the following week will be Thanksgiving. So no study the next 2 weeks. So yeah, nothing there. And then we'll reconvene. That'd be December then, right? Because so December 1st we will meet again. So no study next week, no study the following week, and then we'll meet again December 1st, where we'll finish up Genesis. And then if you want anything, let me know, or just let me know in person. And then, or if not, then I will just select the book. We'll go on. Part of me kind of wants to go on to Exodus. So I don't know how big the push is for that. I don't think I would do all of Exodus. I'd probably stop us at the 10 Commandments because the second half of Exodus is all legal code, where we'll do the 10 Commandments. I'd pick out a few interesting points, and then that would be it, because it changes drastically, where it's interesting seeing what their laws were back then, but it changes a lot, because it goes from Moses to the legal code of Israel. So it's kind of like if you split Exodus into 2 parts. You have the plagues against Egypt, the whole story about Moses, the Red Sea, Passover, all of that. Then they get to Sinai, they're given the 10 Commandments. And then it's not just the 10 Commandments, it's all the other laws. So I kind of want to do Exodus, kind of don't. It is a toss-up for me. So if you're interested in that, let me know. Otherwise, if there's something else, I'm fine with that too. Thought about doing Job, especially the end of Genesis 50. There's some good tie-ins into Job, at least thematically. So if there's anything interesting in that last section, then we can jump into Job after that. I may even bring up Job. At least from a theme standpoint, there's some similarities there. Let's go ahead and open up with a word of prayer. Dear Jesus, thank you for watching over us. Continue to protect us each and every day. Keep us in your word. Remind us that you have died and rose for us, and because of that, we will live forever. So thank you for what you have done. Nurture us, guide us, defend us, and just protect us from all evil. We ask this in your name. Amen. Let's see here. Let's hop into Genesis 46. So Genesis 46. So Israel took his journey with all that he had and came to Beersheba and offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. And God spoke to Israel in visions of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, Here I am. Then he said, I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for there I'll make you into a great nation. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also bring you up again. And Joseph's hand shall close your eyes. So now Jacob's getting ready to journey down. So the sons convinced him and to journey on down. Jacob's convinced that Joseph is now alive. So he's decided he's going to make the journey. So from Beersheba down to Egypt. And then God visits him. So God visits him, speaks to him, similar to how Abraham and Isaac spoke with God. And then God says, don't be afraid to go down to Egypt. I'm going to make you into a great nation. So we're reminded of that original promise back to Abraham, that they are going to be a great nation. And the big thing is that really most of this growth happens in Egypt, because we'll see that right now they'll give us the number at the end. I think it's 70, right? Yeah. So there's 70 people total in this family going down to Egypt. And by the time 400 years goes by, they reproduce, they grow and grow and grow and grow until they're quite numerous. So that's one of the reasons why they end up enslaved, because there's a lot of them. They don't want the Hebrews to have power over them, but also there's just a lot of them. So it's a lot of labor that they can use in whatever they need. So they're going to go down to Egypt, and there God will continue his promise. So they're already growing. So, I mean, from now it's getting clear where, like before Abraham and Isaac, you have Abraham has the one son, Isaac. I mean, he has other children, of course, but Isaac's really the only son of the promise. And then Isaac has his twins, Jacob and Esau, and then Esau kind of goes off and does his own thing. So it's really only Jacob. But then Jacob now has 12 sons, and those sons all have a lot of kids. So you can see now it's starting to really multiply. It's going to keep on growing very quickly from here. And in Egypt is where the bulk of this growth is going to happen, at least originally early on. So then God also promises that he will personally go down with him to Egypt, will also bring him back up again. So there's the promise that Egypt's not forever. So the promised land is Canaan. So they're promised that area. So not in Egypt. So they're going to be outside of their homeland. But God is promising that he's going to bring them back there. So they'll become a great nation, and then they'll be brought back out of Egypt one day. So we know from Abraham that's be 400 years. And so Jacob would know that too. But just to remind us that it's going to be about 400 years that they're down there. And then the other big thing is Joseph's hand shall close your eyes, where he's telling Jacob, I know you're getting older. So he's 130 in these chapters that we're reading, or around 130. And he's telling him that, well, I promise that I'll take your family back up out of Egypt. Like, so he says you, but I think Jacob understands that the you really refers to my family. So like my offspring one day will be brought back from Egypt, because that last line, Joseph's hand shall close your eyes. That's basically God telling him, you're going to go down to Egypt, and Joseph will be the one that puts you to rest. So you will die down there, but then Joseph will put you at rest. And then excuse me, I believe when Jacob passes, this is something that crossed my mind. I forgot to double check. Let me double check Genesis 50. I believe they keep his bones and they bring them back, so he's buried with the forefathers. Where is that? Let's see here. Maybe not. No. They embalmed Joseph. Maybe I'm thinking of something else. I swore they did that with Jacob, but maybe not. Maybe I'm just misremembering something. Anyway, I don't know what I'm thinking there. But anyway, though, the promise, though, is that he's going to see Joseph again, and that Joseph will be the one that lays him to rest. So he will die amongst his family. So he'll be reunited and he'll be at peace. So it'll be good for Jacob, good for the family, and that God will ultimately be with them. So verse 5, then Jacob set out from Beersheba. The sons of Israel carried Jacob, their father, their little ones, and their wives, and the wagons that Pharaoh had sent to carry him. They also took their livestock and their goods, which they had gained in the land of Canaan, and came into Egypt, Jacob and all his offspring with him, his sons and his sons' sons with him, his daughters and his sons' daughters. All his offspring he brought with him into Egypt. So now we just get this, just telling us about their travels. So Pharaoh sent some nice wagons because he's 130, so he's not going to really go anywhere. And I mean, it tells us later on that his eyes are weak. So like back in the ancient world, there really isn't a fix to cataracts. So a lot of people end up with cataracts. And so especially if you're going to live to 130, you're basically going to be blind. You're not going to be able to see a whole lot. So it's going to be very dim, very difficult for him to see. And that's something too, we kind of forget in our modern day society, but like not even that long ago, even 100 years ago, like they didn't really have much cures for things like that. So when you started aging, like your eyesight just goes, and that's that. So it's amazing how quickly we've changed just in the last several decades. But Jacob by now can't really see, pretty much blind. And so he's going to need to be carried in the wagons along with the little ones. They're there, the wives there too. And so if you're strong enough to walk, you'll walk. But if you're smaller or older, you're going to sit in the wagons. So verse 8, now these are the names of the descendants of Israel who came into Egypt, Jacob and his sons. Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, and the sons of Reuben, Hanok, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. The sons of Simeon, Jemuel, Jamin, Ohad, Jachin, Zohar, and Shaul, the son of a Canaanite woman. The sons of Levi, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. The sons of Judah, Onan, Shelah, Perez, and Zerah. For and Onan died in the land of Canaan. And the sons of Perez were Hezron and Hamul. The sons of Issachar, Tola, Puva, Yob, and Shimron. The sons of Zebulun, Sered, Elon, and Jaleel. These are the sons of Leah, whom she bore to Jacob in Paddan Aram, together with his daughter Dinah. Altogether, his sons and daughters numbered 33. So these are the sons born to Leah. So we start with this first chunk of them. So that would be, what would that be? Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. So those are all born to Leah. So how many is that? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So half of his sons come from Leah. And then these are some of the grandsons. But it reminds us that and Onan died already. So that was back in that Judah and that was Judah and Tamar. Yeah, that was back in the Judah and Tamar story. And so they already passed away, so they wouldn't be there. But if they had any sons, they wouldn't have any sons because that story is right. So they already passed away. You have Perez and Zerah, or the sons of Tamar, and so they have survived and they go on. And so and Perez had Hezron and Hamul. So we're getting some of the grandsons here as well. And so from Leah, that's going to number 33. So we're going to get a lot of people there. So we can see that the family's quite large just from that first chunk, but we still got a few more. 16, the sons of Gad, Ziphion, Haggai, Shuni, Esbon, Eri, Arodi, and Areli. The sons of Asher, Imnah, Isva, Ishvi, Beriah, with Sarah, their sister. And the sons of Beriah, Heber, and Malchil. These are the sons of Zilpah, whom Laban gave to Leah, his daughter, and these she bore to Jacob, 16 persons. So this is the servant of Leah, Zilpah. So we remember that Jacob has 4 wives, but 2 of them are like concubines. So these are the sons of Zilpah. So that would be Gad and Asher. So also some other tribes of Israel, so either Gad and Asher, who are also born, and all their sons and children. Next, the sons of the sons of Rachel, Jacob's wife, Joseph and Benjamin. And to Joseph in the land of Egypt were born Manasseh and Ephraim, whom Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, the priest of On, bore to him. And the sons of Benjamin, Bela, Becher, Ashbel, Gera, Naaman, Ehi, Rosh, Mupin, Hupin, and Ard. These are the sons of Rachel who were born to Jacob, 14 persons in all. So it's interesting they named Benjamin's sons. I've been trying to figure out just how old Benjamin actually was during this. I was always under the impression he was a bit younger, but then like his sons, the list of his sons is actually like the longest, it seems, out of everybody. So either he married young and they had a lot of kids right away, and so he was like in his early 20s, and they already, I don't know how you could possibly do that actually, because that's a lot of kids. Either I just calculated things wrong and he's like in his 30s, which that would be plausible, or the other option is he is still younger because Benjamin was born quite a bit later. This is kind of working as a genealogy where some of these sons may not have been born yet. It does count them like they are traveling, but I do wonder with Benjamin, is it that he's younger and these kids have yet to be born and we're just marking off all of the sons just for completion's sake? Or is it that he is older and all these sons were already born? And so like the age things is always difficult in Genesis because like Jacob's 130 and you wonder, is Joseph a bit older? And so everyone's kind of aged up a bit, like a decade or 2 more than kind of what we might think. I don't know. It's hard to kind of tell. I think I must have just been wrong with the age of Benjamin. I always thought he was around his 20s. And so I got to go back and do that math. The reading is like, that's right. He has all these sons. There's not as much detail on when exactly Benjamin is born in relation to Joseph. All we know is Benjamin is born after their time in Paddan Aram. So he would be quite a bit younger. And so it's interesting. They name all these sons, which then that leads me to conclude not all of them are around yet. Maybe a few are born and then the rest are born in Egypt. But we want to name them all here because this is really like the last genealogy in Genesis. We're kind of wrapping things up here. We're wrapping up the family of Israel. And so we're just going to include them here just so we remember, oh yeah, we have the family of Benjamin, even though they're not technically at this time chronologically all there yet, they will be born later on. Because that's something too that like the ancients do. They're not entirely consistent chronologically. It's not saying that God's word is wrong. It's just saying they didn't care about these things as much as we seem to do. So it kind of, so that's why like it doesn't really bother me, and that's why like I don't care to really try to really figure that out, because it's like at some point Benjamin had these kids. Was it before or after Egypt? I don't know, but they end up producing the tribe of Benjamin, so it's fine. And they weren't as consistent or as I shouldn't say methodological, but they jump out of order in the middle of the story sometimes. So not everything is necessarily in order. So that's why we see all these sons of Benjamin, I think, is just because even though he's the youngest, he has all these kids. Some of them are born afterwards in Egypt. 23, the son of Dan, Hushim, the sons of Naphtali, Jazeel, Guni, Jezer, and Shalem. These are the sons of Bilhah, whom Laban gave to Rachel his daughter, and these she bore to Jacob, 7 persons in all. And so we get to the last 2 sons. They're from Bilhah, who is the servant of Rachel. And so then we get the last couple sons here. And so that is everyone. That is all 12 sons of Jacob. So 26, all the persons belonging to Jacob who came to Egypt were his own descendants, not including Jacob's sons' wives, were 66 persons in all. And the sons of Joseph who were born to him in Egypt were 2. All the persons in the house of Jacob who came to Egypt were 70. So we get that final count of these 70 people, but there'd also be a lot of servants in Jacob's household. He presumably would have had some wealth. And so there would have more than just 70 people, but in the family, the main focus here, there would be about 70 at this point. And that 70 is going to grow a lot. They're going to really multiply by the time 400 years are passed and they are leaving Egypt to head back to the promised land. Verse 28. He had sent Judah ahead of him to Joseph to show the way before him in Goshen, and they came in the land of Goshen. Then Joseph prepared his chariot and went up to meet Israel, his father, in Goshen. He presented to himself and fell on his neck and wept on his neck a good while. Israel said to Joseph, "Now let me die, since I have seen your face and know that you are still alive." Joseph said to his brothers and his father's household, "I will go up and tell Pharaoh and will say to him, my brothers and my father's household who are in the land of Canaan have come to me, and the men are shepherds, for they have been keepers of livestock, and they have brought their flocks and their herds and all they have had. When Pharaoh calls you and says, 'What is your occupation?' you shall say, 'Your servants have been keepers of livestock from our youth even until now, both we and our fathers, in order that you may dwell in the land of Goshen, for every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians.'" So Goshen is this region that's a little bit removed from Egypt. It's not very far at all. It's still in Egypt. But you get the idea that where, like, we know where it is geographically. It's a little bit like northeast of where the mainland of Egypt is. And what was I going to say now? It seems they have some kind of grazing area where it's going to have land for livestock. And what's interesting, though, is that the shepherds are an abomination to the Egyptians. So they don't like shepherds for one reason or another. It's just an interesting point there. And so he's basically saying Pharaoh has promised this land already, but remind him of your occupation, and so that you end up kind of separate in this land of Goshen. And the separateness is also what leads them, I think, into slavery, where you end up with a new Pharaoh who doesn't know them. He's thinking, well, these people are different. Maybe they're going to even rule over us. They're these shepherds. We don't like shepherds. Let's go ahead and enslave them. And also later on, we'll see why they end up into slavery. So like I was talking about earlier, why people end up in slavery is also, well, they have to sell everything. Because of the famine, they run out of money. So they end up having to sell livestock and then eventually sell themselves. And so you wonder how many people in Israel even end up having to sell themselves into slavery in order not to starve. So we'll see that in a few moments too. But before that, Joseph is telling Israel how what to say to Pharaoh in order that the agreements are all settled and squared away. But also I want to point out too, just Israel and Joseph finally end up back together. So father and son finally meet each other again. They're happy that they're both still alive. Because Joseph's thinking, well, so many years have passed. Jacob, my dad, might be dead by now. And he and Israel always thought that Joseph was dead. And so this is just beautiful. They're happy to be reunited together once again. So just really good that they're finally back together. Chapter 47. So Joseph went in and told Pharaoh, "My father and my brothers with their flocks and herds and all that they possess have come from the land of Canaan. They are now in the land of Goshen." And from among his brothers, he took 5 men and presented them to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to his brothers, "What is your occupation?" And they said to Pharaoh, "Your servants are shepherds, as our fathers were." They said to Pharaoh, "We have come to sojourn in the land, for there is no pasture for your servants' flocks, so the famine is severe in the land of Canaan. And now please let your servants dwell in the land of Goshen." Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, your father and your brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is before you. Settle your father and your brothers in the best in the land. Let them settle in the land of Goshen. And if you know any able men among them, put them in charge of my livestock. So they, even though shepherds are an abomination, they still have livestock. And I wonder if that shepherd being an abomination, it's because they're more nomadic. So they're like, you get the idea from Jacob and his family. They wander around Canaan. The difference is Egypt, they're pretty sedentary, where because of the Nile, they just have all this land. So people aren't really nomads with Egypt, where they simply just live there in Egypt. And so it's a bit more, dare I say, modern than what we are used to, than what we've been used to talking through the Old Testament. So you have these people being brought into Egypt, and they're shepherds. And so Pharaoh says, well, if they've been doing this their whole life, send some of my livestock over, and so they can take care of them too. So he's giving them gifts in a sense, where they're gifts, but also work, where you wonder, are they keeping some of the livestock for themselves? It's Pharaoh saying thank you to Joseph in another way, or is he giving them some work to do already, where he's saying, well, they're good at this, let's have them continue on. So I had that thought too, where is this service, or is a gift, a bit of both? We don't get the complete terms of the arrangement, but they are given land, which is a big deal. And because they're given so much land, they reproduce. And so not just livestock, but the people. And that's what really produces the whole family of Israel, the whole nation of Israel. Verse 7. Then Joseph brought in Jacob, his father, and stood him before Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Jacob, how many are the days of the years of your life? And Jacob said to Pharaoh, the days of the years of my sojourning are 130 years. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life, and they have not attained to the days of the years of the life of my fathers in the days of their sojourning. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from the presence of Pharaoh. Then Joseph settled his father and his brothers and gave them possession in the land of Egypt and the best of the land, in the land of Ramses, as Pharaoh had commanded. And Joseph provided his father and his brothers, all his father's household, with food according to the number of their dependents. So let's see here. So going back to the top here, I hate when I go between the notes and up here. But anyway, shifts everything around. But anyway, Jacob blesses Pharaoh, and that's very interesting. And so he blesses Pharaoh. And this Pharaoh, we've kind of had inclinations that he might be a believer. This is another one where you wonder, does he believe in the one true God? Has Joseph worked on him where he believes in Jacob's God? Does Pharaoh still worship the Egyptian gods? Does Pharaoh consider himself a god? Because that was something too that happened in Egypt at certain times, was emperor worship. So all those questions kind of go out of my head, but it's interesting that Jacob blesses him. It could also be just another word for thank, where he's showing his gratitude, both because of how Pharaoh treated Joseph and also for giving them all this land. But Pharaoh is just happy for Joseph that his dad, his whole family is here now. They're safe from the famine in Canaan, and now they're given the land of Goshen, also known as the land of Ramses. So Ramses is where the city of Ramses will later be built. So it's named after one of these pharaohs, Ramses. And so that's later on. So the Ramses we really know are from Moses's day, not from Joseph's. So this is someone later on kind of reminding us exactly where this is. In case we don't know where Goshen is, well, it's in the same area where the city of Ramses ends up being built. So this is still evidence that, like Genesis, while it would have been oral tradition for quite some time, centuries, that it would have been written down later on, long after these events happened, and that they sometimes have some of these anachronistic names just to kind of help their modern day readers know where exactly these things are. And that's just another reminder too, that it's another hint maybe that Ramses was the pharaoh too for Moses, because there's those two options. That it could be Ramses II or Amenhotep II. And so it's one of those two guys. And so it could be one or the other during the days of Moses. But I digress. They settle that land, the land of Ramses, as Pharaoh commands. Verse 13. Now there was no food in all the land, for the famine was very severe. So the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished by reason of the famine. And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan in exchange for the grain that they bought. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. When the money was all spent in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, "Give us food. Why would we die before your eyes? For our money is gone." And Joseph answered, "Give your livestock, and I will give you food in exchange for your livestock if your money is gone." So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them food in exchange for their horses, the flocks, the herds, and the donkeys. He supplied them with food in exchange for all their livestock that year. When that year was ended, they came to him the following year and said to him, "We will not hide from my lord that our money is all spent. The herds of livestock are my lord's. There is nothing left in the sight of my lord but our bodies and our land. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for food, and we with our land will be servants to Pharaoh. Give us seed that we may live and not die, and that the land may not be desolate." So there's still no food, so it's still just in the storehouses. So Joseph is still selling all of the food to people, so they're paying money. So you get the idea. Everyone is there. So the land of Egypt, land of Canaan. So you wonder too, like it's probably not just Jacob's family, but other people are coming from Canaan as well. And they eventually run out of money. So then they say, well, let's start selling livestock. So we'll give livestock in exchange for food. And so then they run out of livestock. And then they say, well, you know what? Buy our land, buy us. And so they sell themselves, they sell the land that they own. And so in that way, a lot of people end up enslaved to Egypt. Now, this is kind of like it's a mixture between slavery and indentured servitude, where they're basically buying off their debt, or they're working off their debt, I should say, and that eventually, in theory, the slavery will end. Now, here's the catch. Sometimes that is what would happen, where you work off your debt, you're free to go. The thing is, you're really trusting whoever's in power over you allows that to happen, because they can easily mistreat you, and because you don't have any power as a slave, and you end up just in slavery forever. And so that's something that pretty much happens to the Hebrews, unfortunately, where Moses has to free them from that, or God sends Moses to free them from that slavery. But that was their only option. I mean, 7 years of famine. Jacob comes down in year 2. So there's still 5 more years. So that's a long time to go. I mean, they don't want the land to become desolate, but I mean, the land's probably pretty bad at that point. And so they're going to have to eventually replant, and things will get better. Things will be watered again. But they're going to have to sell themselves into slavery in order to make it through all of this. So verse 20. So Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, and for all the Egyptians sold their fields, because the famine was severe on them. The land became Pharaoh's. As for the people, he made servants of them from one end of Egypt to the other. Only the land of the priests he did not buy, for the priests had a fixed allowance from Pharaoh and lived on the allowance that Pharaoh gave them. Therefore, they did not sell their land. So you get this idea that, I mean, all this wealth, I mean, it's going to Joseph. Pharaoh is, of course, paying Joseph well, where he's receiving a cut of this too. But eventually the wealth does end up in the hands of Pharaoh. And so Pharaoh's going to be very wealthy. I mean, he's already wealthy, but he's going to be even more wealthy, where he essentially owns, it says, all the people. So all the land, all the people are Pharaoh's. And also all the land ends up under his ownership and control. So now this consolidates power under Pharaoh, where you get the idea that Pharaoh comes out of this famine very, very powerful. And also his sons are going to be quite powerful coming out of this famine. So that really helps them out. And this also reminds us of practice of levirate marriage. And why am I bringing this up? Where if a woman passes away, she marries the brother of her deceased husband. It's for land ownership reasons. That's one of the main reasons they do that, because they want to avoid things like this happening. Because what ends up happening is the rich end up devouring all of the land, and they end up consolidating it. And that, I mean, we see that in the modern day with land, but also just with money. That if you allow these very powerful, rich corporations to go unchecked, unregulated, you end up with just a couple corporations running the show. We see that with Amazon. We see that with Walmart. And it's just a reminder that, well, they had checks against those kind of things in the ancient world where they made sure that the land kept going to the original owners, the descendants of the original owner. That's something in our modern day we need to keep in mind where, well, if you allow greed, capitalism to remain unfettered, well, I mean, it's all greed. People will give in to sin. Corporations will give in to sin. You end up all owned by one entity in the end. And that's what happened here. And so it's the same back then, and it's the same today. And so it's a reminder to remember, okay, like people are sinners. There's constant greed. And you know, a lot of the things that we do that go on in our country are born out of greed and unchecked capitalism. And so it's a reminder that, hey, we got to check some of these powerful corporations so that things like this don't happen where one person or one company ends up in power over everything else. And likewise, that's what happens here, where Pharaoh is able to take advantage of the fact that the people are so weak and he has all the food. And so he's able to even buy them and their land. And so everyone ends up enslaved and their land ends up being owned by Pharaoh. And so it's just an interesting parallel into our modern day. Verse 23. Then Joseph said to the people, behold, I have this day bought you and your land for Pharaoh. Now here is seed for you, and you shall sow the land. And at the harvest you shall give a fifth to Pharaoh, and 4/5 shall be your own, as seed for the field, and as food for yourselves and your households, and as food for your little ones. And they said, you have saved our lives. May it please my Lord, we will be servants to Pharaoh. So Joseph made it a statute concerning the land of Egypt, and it stands to this day, that Pharaoh should have the fifth. The land of the priests alone did not become Pharaoh's. So that was something that, at least whenever Genesis was written down, like to this day, so we say it's ascribed to Moses, but there's no evidence that Moses wrote down Genesis. So that's just something church tradition has always said. It could be Moses, it could be later on, like in the days of David or even later. But the thing is that it seems like for centuries, this was the practice where you gave a fifth of the land to Egypt, back to Pharaoh. So that made Pharaoh still very rich throughout all the history of the land of Egypt. And it fits a lot. So like we think about like tithing, where that's 10%, a fifth is 20%. That's double a tithe. That Joseph and Pharaoh are asking for quite a bit just for Pharaoh and his household. So you see, so when like God makes the tithe, that's half of what Pharaoh demands. And so you see how there's a difference too between Egypt and Israel in what the demands are as well. It's just very fascinating what's going on here. So anyway, verse 27. Thus Israel settled the land of Egypt and the land of Goshen, and they gained possession in it and were fruitful and multiplied greatly. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the days of Jacob, the years of his life, were 147 years. And the time drew near that Israel must die. He called his son Joseph and said to him, if now I have found favor in your sight, put your hand under my thigh and promise to deal kindly and truly with me. Do not bury me in Egypt, but let me lie with my fathers. Carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burying place. He answered, I will do as you have said. And he said, swear to me. And he swore to him. And Israel bowed himself upon the head of his bed. So that's what I was remembering. I thought that was, for some reason, I read ahead. I thought that was in 49 and 50, and it was in the section we're doing today. I feel stupid. But anyway, so we jump ahead beyond the famine. They're there for 17 years. So Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. And so he's there. He's 130 when he's there and 147 by the time he passes away. So he's kind of on his deathbed, or at least he's getting very weak. So now is the time to begin blessing people. So he's going to bless Joseph's sons first, but then in chapter 49, which we'll do a few weeks from now, he will bless the rest of the sons of Israel. So his direct sons, not his grandsons. So he also says, don't bury me in Egypt, but let me lie with my fathers. And so they're going to keep like what's called an ossuary, where when he dies, they will keep his bones in a box essentially, and then bring him back to Israel and bury him there. So that's the plan with Jacob, and that's what he wants, and so that's what will be done so that he's buried with his fathers in the family tomb up in Canaan in the promised land. And then he puts his hand under his thigh. So like he's kind of like bowing before his father. And so Jacob's going to give him this good blessing. Actually, not really Joseph, but really well, actually the hand of the thigh is the kind of guarantee that Joseph will carry this out, being buried not in Egypt, but in Canaan. Because afterwards, he's going to bless Manasseh and Ephraim, Joseph's two sons. So chapter 48. After this, Joseph was told, behold, your father is ill. So he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And it was told to Jacob, your son Joseph has come to you. And Israel summoned his strength and sat up in bed. And Jacob said to Joseph, God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me and said to me, behold, I'll make you fruitful and multiply you, and I'll make you a company of peoples, and will give this land to your offspring after you for an everlasting possession. And now your two sons who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you in Egypt are mine. Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine, as Reuben and Simeon are. And the children that you father after them shall be yours. They shall be called by the name of their brothers and their inheritance. As for me, when I came from Paddan, 'tis to my sorrow Rachel died in the land of Canaan on the way, when there is still some distance to go to Ephrath, and I buried her there on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. So Jacob now claims Joseph's sons as his own. And so it's kind of weird at first, but he's doing that basically to bless Joseph, like to give Joseph a double portion of the blessing. So Joseph already has it made. And presumably Ephraim and Manasseh will also inherit some from Joseph as well. But Jacob is calling them his sons in order that they become part of the tribes of Israel. So that they receive some of these blessings, and then they end up basically part of this tribe. And that they end up with land ownership as well. So they are kind of brought up a generation, like along with Reuben, like the way Reuben and Simeon are his sons. And what ends up happening is they end up, those two tribes end up having land possessions in Israel. So what we've been talking about is Canaan, but once the promised land becomes the nation of Israel, they will have their own land. So Joseph, there is no tribe of Joseph. Joseph does not have land named after him. Ephraim and Manasseh do. And then Levi does not also have land because Levi becomes the priestly tribe, and they end up in cities to help with the worship. So you subtract Levi and Joseph, and then you add to Manasseh and Ephraim back in. And so that's how you get back to 12 tribes. Because depending on how you count things, the 12 tribes kind of change. So like you say, well, who are the 12 sons of Jacob? And you mean like direct biological sons. He still had 12 sons. And so you can go through them all. But if you say, who are the 12 tribes? Who are the 12 land-owning tribes? There's two names that switch out for two other names. So you still end up with 12, but you're kind of switching them out. And so there's a few instances like that where the names kind of switch. And then even we didn't read this last Sunday, but Revelation 7, that's where you have the 144,000 being sealed. And so you have 12,000 from the tribe of Judah, 12,000 from the tribe of Reuben. That passage that we have all these numbers where people go like, are only 144,000 people being saved? And I say, no, it's symbolic of the 12 tribes. And so it's telling us that we're going to be numbered, but also in verse 9, we're not numbered because there's so many of us. So God knows who we all are, but from our human perspective, we just can't number because there's so many. There's even more than 144,000. That's the point. But in that listing, in that tribe, in those tribes, what's interesting is some are replaced. And so Dan is excluded and Joseph is included back in. And also Levi is included. And then who's the other one who's taken out? Now I'm blanking on that. But anyway, that list changes as well. So like there's always 12, but with Ephraim and Manasseh kind of making it up to 14, some are always excluded for one reason or another. And so it's always 12, but how you get to that 12 kind of changes depending on the context and what you're talking about. You're talking about the direct sons of Joseph, or are you talking about the land-owning tribes? And so that's the main distinction, but there are a few other minor distinctions as well. My computer did something weird there, so if I suddenly disappear, you'll know that something's going on. There might be a Windows update installing. I just saw a command prompt open and close real fast. But anyway, Moving on to verse 8. When Israel saw Joseph's sons, he said, "Who are these?" Joseph said to his father, "They are my sons whom God has given me here." And he said, "Bring them to me, please, that I may bless them." Now the eyes of Israel were dim with age that he could not see. So Joseph brought them near him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said to Joseph, "I never expected to see your face, and behold, God has let me see your offspring also." Then Joseph removed them from his knees, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and brought them near him. And Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on the head of Ephraim, who was the younger, and his left hand on the head of Manasseh, crossing his hands, for Manasseh was the firstborn. So I'll get to the blessings in a moment. So what's going on here is kind of reminiscent of Jacob and Esau, where Jacob's the younger and receives the blessings of the older. So they crisscross. And so you can picture Ephraim is in Joseph's right hand, and then Manasseh in his left hand. That's on purpose because Manasseh is the older. And so you think about the mirror image, if you can picture this in your head, as Joseph walks his two sons to Jacob, that Manasseh would then end up in Jacob's right hand and Ephraim in the left. That's on purpose because Manasseh is the older. He should receive the greater blessing. But then Jacob crosses over, where he crosses his hands, and so he's kind of like this. And he does that because Ephraim is going to receive the greater blessing, because by prophecy, Jacob knows where Ephraim is going to end up. So 15, and he blessed Joseph and said, "The God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life long to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the boys. And in them let my name be carried on, in the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth." Let's see here. I just thought of something. Let's see here. Okay, so he's blessing them both, but Ephraim will receive the greater blessing in just a few verses. And so he's reminding them that the same God that was with him and his forefathers, that same God is going to remain with these boys, with his family. And so he's passing on from father to son the same promises that were passed on to him from Abraham to Isaac. They're going to keep multiplying, become a great nation, enter into the promised land, be a multitude. So a few things here. He blesses Joseph. So remember, like I've been saying, it's like Joseph is getting a double share, where he's kind of blessing Joseph by blessing Ephraim and Manasseh. Like I've been saying, Joseph, he doesn't really need any material wealth. He's far richer than the rest of his family. But Jacob also kind of favors Joseph, and so he wants this blessing to kind of continue on. So he's going to especially bless Ephraim and Manasseh. So he's kind of giving Joseph a double share here. So the blessing, also what I want to point out, the big thing, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil. And this is really fascinating. I take this as Christological. Because I'll remind you, the word for angel in Hebrew is just the word for messenger. So it's always a translator's choice, whether they say messenger or angel. So it could also be a valid translation, say the messenger who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the boys. And in some ways, I kind of prefer that. In some ways, I prefer angel. Because I take this Christologically, where he's actually referring to the second person of the Trinity, Jesus, because you have that redemption word in there. You also, like I've been saying, like he's also experienced God in the flesh talking to him. And like I've said before, well, if God is showing up in the form of a human being, well, the only other time we know someone happening is with Jesus. And so is that really Jesus? And all this has been about redemption, about salvation. So the translators translate it as angel because they want it parallel with God. We're talking about divine persons, divine beings. So angel makes a ton of sense there. That makes the most sense. But I think this is really referring to Jesus. And so Jesus, he is talked about as like a messenger, where like in Luke 4, where he expounds on Isaiah and says like, today this has been fulfilled in your hearing, where like Jesus is acting as an angel. He's acting as a messenger from God, giving them the gospel, giving them the good news. And then like I've brought up a few times, Hebrews 1, in these latter days, God has spoken to us by his son, where it is actually proper to, not maybe proper, but it's possible to talk about Jesus as an angel. Now I want to be specific here. I'm changing kind of how the language works, because he's not an angel with wings that we think about. No, he's not an angel in that sense. He is equal. He is, like, as we say, like in the creeds, he is true God, true man. So he is God in the flesh. But one of the main jobs of Jesus is to give the gospel, to give the good news. So in that way, Jesus is like one of Jesus's jobs is to be a messenger, to be an angel. So like whether or not, whichever word you prefer, that's what I'm getting at here, where he's not like literally an angel, but he's doing that job. He's doing that function of providing the gospel, providing the good news, and especially that the angel who has redeemed me from all evil. That's what Jesus does. He's the one who redeems us. I mean, this is the same word that we had in Ruth for redeem, the kinsman redeemer. Boaz was the kinsman redeemer of Ruth. And so like in the same way that Jesus is our kinsman redeemer. So this is definitely Christological. This is a prophecy happening here. So whether or not you want to say angel or messenger, that's up to you. Our translators, at least in the ESV, say angel. The other reason why this is acceptable as well, in Revelation, you have the archangel Michael defeating Satan, and it's at the end of one of those cycles in Revelation where it's usually Jesus being the one that triumphs, but there it's the archangel Michael. And what's interesting in Revelation with that is the name Michael means who is like God. And so is it like this really powerful angel defeating Satan, or is that just another term for Jesus? I take it that way, that that's another term for Jesus. And so, like I've been saying, there are certain times, especially in the Old Testament or in Revelation, where an angel isn't what we normally define as an angel. It's actually Jesus. And this is definitely one of those cases where I think it's pretty clear. I mean, this angel is the one who is redeeming. I mean, I don't think it can get more clear than that. And it's in parallel. So you have these three lines in parallel with each other. And being in parallel is a big deal. That's how they did poetry. Where if you go through the Psalms, the main poetic device is parallelism, or it's like or it's either crisscrossing or it's directly in line parallel with one another, where you have the same concept. So like God who is doing something, in the last line, the angel who is doing something. Well, that angel is redeeming. So that angel is also one-on-one with God. But there's something different about that angel. Well, what's different about him? Well, it's God in the flesh, Jesus. And he's the one who is saving me, redeeming me, being my kinsman redeemer, buying me back from slavery. So you have all of these themes all just interwoven here, because they're either enslaved already or they're about to be enslaved by Pharaoh. And they're going to need someone to redeem them. And so God, of course, is going to redeem them by the Passover. And in that other way, like even the angel of death, there's also some arguments to be made that the angel of death is also even Christological. Like, how can Jesus, the Lord of life, be also the Lord of death? Well, I'm thinking to head to my sermon. We're in the end times section. November always talks about end times. And Jesus is the one who also judges the earth and is kind of the one who attacks the earth. And so there's also some violence there. And so it is proper to kind of speak of Jesus that way. So there's some interesting overlaps there. And so where we're headed with Passover and Exodus, but also looking way ahead to the Gospels, all of that can be seen being foreshadowed in this verse here. So that's what's really neat about this. And so I just really like that. But the point is that the promise is for his offspring. So then verse 17, when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, it displeased him. And he took his father's hand and moved it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, not this way, my father, since this one is the firstborn, put your right hand on his head. But his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. Nevertheless, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his offspring shall become a multitude of nations. So he blessed them that day, saying, by you Israel will pronounce blessing, saying, God make you as Ephraim and as Manasseh. Thus he put Ephraim before Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, behold, I am about to die, but God will be with you and will bring you again to the land of your fathers. Moreover, I have given to you, rather than to your brothers, one mountain slope that I took from the hand of the Amorites with my sword and with my bow. So Joseph's like, wait, you're supposed to bless the older ones instead of the younger. But then he says, no, I know what I'm doing. I'm doing this on purpose. Ephraim is going to be great on his own. This is prophesying the fact that the kings of the northern 10 tribes come from the tribe of Ephraim. So we usually focus on Judah being the southern tribe. The kings go through Judah because Jesus comes out of Judah. Well, we kind of forget to mention that, well, there's also the northern lineage. So after the tribes split apart, so after Solomon, you have Jeroboam fighting against Rehoboam. So Rehoboam is the son of Solomon, so he takes over in the south. Jeroboam is the person in the north. Jeroboam is of the tribe of Ephraim, and so his descendants all are from Ephraim, and so the kings in the north are all from Ephraim, and so that's what Jacob is getting at here, is that he's looking ahead to the day that sadly the people are divided and separate, but they are descended from Ephraim. At least the kings are descended from Ephraim in the north. And so in that way, Ephraim and Judah are kind of opposed, but also similar to one another. And that this comes from this blessing that Jacob wanted to give special to Joseph and his sons. So I find it interesting that he's especially blessing his son Joseph, but also blessing the younger of the two in the same way that he himself, Jacob, the younger, was blessed over Esau. So there's some parallels there going back to his time and his youth. And so he blesses Ephraim over Manasseh. And that he once again reiterates, bring me to the land of my fathers when I die, and that you also, like special inheritance to you and to your brothers, there's a certain mountain slope. And so he mentions this one hill or this one mountain. So it's interesting he brings that up, but that's the blessing that he gives. And so that's where I will end for today. So in 3 weeks, so we're not here next week, we're not here the following week. In 3 weeks in December, we will have the end of Genesis. So interesting stuff today. I love the Christological stuff you get there with the blessing that Joseph gives. And that, I find that just really interesting and prophetic and just good for us to know, like, yeah, all this stuff has been planned since the beginning. Jesus has come to save us. Let's go ahead and close with a word of prayer. Dear Jesus, thank you for being our kinsman redeemer, that you have saved us, you have washed us clean from our sins, you have risen from the dead. Remind us of your great love for your family, for the family of Abraham, the family of Israel, Lord, and also how we are adopted into that family, that you have redeemed us Gentiles and brought us into your family, Lord. So thank you for what you've done for us, and guide us as we continue to read your word every day. We ask this in your name. Amen. Thank you. Real interesting stuff today. Looking forward I'm looking forward to next week to see my family, but I am looking forward to finishing up Genesis and trying to figure out where we go from there. Have a blessed week.